Tell me a little bit more about Monster Magnet and your personal experience with the agency and just kind of background with retention marketing.
Absolutely. Okay, so Magnet Monster, I believe, is almost 5 years old. It started off with two co-founders that did some email and SMS marketing work for a bodybuilding site. I think it's actually bodybuilding.com, because they both came out of the bodybuilding supplement, industry back then. And then slowly but surely from there on, it just built up, and it grew over time to, us servicing over 100 D2C brands to date. Well over 100. So, I mean, we've been, in the industry, since the early days when it was less crowded, as per se. I joined about 2 years and 8 months ago. So it's quite a funny story. I started as a bit of a hybrid person within the agency. So the idea was to make me a project manager on the one side of the coin, where I serviced a handful of client accounts. And then parallel to that, I was also playing the role of the operational manager, looking at the processes and the workflows and so on. So to date, and then of course I transitioned over to becoming the CEO, the big dog of the agency. It's been a blessing. It's been an absolute blessing. The internal culture is very strong. People absolutely love working here. We get a lot of applicants that aspire to work here, and I will definitely call this my home probably till I'm old and grey and can't work any longer.
Yeah, that's a good story. It sounds like a good transition through going from account and ops to CEO as well, because that was a recent transition, or relatively recent, right?
That is correct. That's correct. The beauty about being a project manager is that you are in the weeds of
Hmm.
the client accounts. So you get to learn about the pain points they're facing, the goals and objectives they have, by investing in your services. You also get to learn, of course, more about, the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of what makes our jobs, great, and the service we deliver. And yep, you're right. It was a recent transition, me taking over from Adam Kitchen, the former CEO, who's now a lot more focused on digital products and training material. And yep, I'm now the guy that has taken over from him in fitting his big shoes.
Yeah, and it really does give you, I don't think unfair advantage is the right term, but it gives you an advantage to have been in the role in the past, or at least in some of the experience of the roles in the past that you're now managing, because you can better understand what they're going through, like you said. But it helps with communication and empathy as you're trying to make decisions and changes in the organization as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's correct. The other beauty is that over the years, I've built up trust with my internal team
Hmm.
members as well as external clients. So if I now want to rally the team, if I want to bring in big initiatives, I can do it without consulting, five, seven different stakeholders. The other beauty about it is also I've also cemented myself, in the agency to become a big critical decision maker, meaning that we can move rapidly fast without having a long string of gatekeepers or people that we need to consult if we want to make fast decisions. So you are correct in saying that.
Yeah, and that being able to move fast, very important as you continue to grow. And so retention marketing, your main service focuses, or your main services, right? Within that, email, SMS, what all service wise does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So exactly like you say, yeah, our core channel is pretty much email and SMS as a focus area or as message types. We then also dabble in other areas which involves direct mail, so postcards, people receiving an actual postcard in their postbox. It is especially handy because email inboxes are quite cluttered nowadays, or it's always been. So we're trying to cut through the noise of the channel. So we've had great success with direct mail. Shout out to Post Pilot, our partner in that regard. The other areas that we've also dabbled in is push notifications. How can we, ping people, within an app or their browser to get their attention? We also focus heavily on subscription models. So if it's a D2C business that is selling via a subscription model, that's a huge chunk of, repeat purchase revenue. The other one that we also intend to also look at is loyalty programs. How can we, build a loyalty program or loyalty system for a brand that does encourage repeat purchase behavior? So all of those touch points and life cycle stages kind of forms the foundational elements of a retention marketing program.
And you say you do subscription marketing. I've seen some discussions on LinkedIn, some on Twitter as well, here recently over the past week or two, where people were talking about retention, acquisition when it comes to subscription marketing. Which one is, which one's more important? Which one matters more? And as I shared with you earlier, I was looking through the blog articles on your website. If anybody listening hasn't seen those, definitely go to their website and check them out. And one of the articles was focusing on email marketing for 6-figure, 7-figure, and 8-figure brands. And something that I thought was pretty interesting, just kind of starting at the 6-figure brands, is you primarily point out brands at that stage should keep things simpler, right? Which we can talk about, and focus almost exclusively on acquisition to improve your retention, and focus on making sure you have a good loop for qualitative feedback, making sure that you have a good product market fit. Just kind of talk with me a little bit through that mindset. And at 6 figures, what are the priorities when it comes to retention marketing, maybe from an automation or flow standpoint, or just like a tech or tool standpoint for 6-figure brands?
Yeah, good conversation to have. The thing about 6-figure brands is that there's a lot less complexities involved in their business. The teams they include in their marketing departments, they usually also have a much smaller tech stack. The data that they collect is usually also a lot less compared to your 8-9 figure brands. So you've got easier things to work with. Essentially, you can also move faster at times just because there's fewer hands involved. Sometimes there's not even a retail arm, where if it's an 8-9 figure brand, you also get a retail arm. Now you need to talk about offline to online, syncing of your marketing efforts. But to answer your question, so very much we have a couple of key moneymaker flows that we always put in place for 6-figure brands. I mean, you're talking about like the welcome flow. When someone subscribes to your newsletter, you do want to obviously hit them with the right message up front in the acquisition stages. You're talking about abandonment recovery type of flows, checkout abandonment, a cart abandonment, added to cart abandonment, browse abandonment. Those are all great flows to put in place just because people are showing some intention to buy. So you do want to capture them while they are, looking to buy your product. And then, of course, the rest follows. Review request flows if you want to ramp up your product reviews or your brand reviews. User generated content collection, where if someone made a purchase or if they've dropped a positive review, you can ask them, for user generated content, maybe a video shot of your product. So those are kind of the stock standard things that we put in place from a flow automation perspective. We then also, of course, do campaigns. It depends on the revenue contribution this particular brand gets from campaign sends. If there's a big split between campaign inflows, let's say for argument's sake, it's a 75-25 split. So 75 is campaigns, 25 is flow revenue. Of course, campaigns is top of mind for these smaller brands as well, small to medium-sized brands. In terms of tech stack, I mean, wow, that's quite a wide question just because, there's so much available out there. But the key ones, of course, is to get if you don't have a quiz, if your product or type, your product type lends itself towards a quiz, and your pop-up forms, get that in place, just because zero-party data collection is a critical piece to the puzzle for any size brand. Just because we know in a cookieless world where privacy is at stake here, we won't be able to track people effectively. You do want to collect data from them. Other things that we also advise people on is a proper order tracking type of software. Something like Wonderment is a great recommendation there. So if someone makes a purchase, you want to keep them updated as the shipping of that product, happens in the fulfillment side of things. Your order is ready for pickup. A courier just picked up your product. Your product has been delivered, or shipment delay. Those are all stunning touch points to nurture your customer. And then lastly, you're looking at something like little data. Now, in a world where there's ad blockers blocking tracking scripts, and there's iOS 15 where they don't want to get tracked, the little datas of the world, they've got a server-side tracking platform that doesn't get interfered with, ad blockers and so on. So you can, track more anonymous visitors. You can identify them, and you can market to more people with your email and SMS touch points. So those are kind of roughly the things that we do advise six-figure brands to get in place as a bare minimum.
And with the little data piece, I did see another article which we'll end up talking about a little bit later. But one of the pieces in that was focusing on just the bottlenecks or the issues that can come with going solely off of Klaviyo or platform data for attribution for sales. Is that where something like little data comes in, or a tool similar?
Correct. You're also talking about the triple whales and the
Mm.
lifetime leads and the north beams. I mean, there's a lot of attribution tools out there, measurement tools. GA4, the big one. If the data you are collecting, if that is noisy and not clean, you struggle to effectively, measure your efforts. And people don't trust their data sources, exactly like you've said. People don't trust Klaviyo's data because, is it over attributed? Is it clean? Is the attribution credits they get, is that fairly, allocated? And the little datas, they do try and, unlock or enable cleaner data for D2C brands. Yep.
Yeah, Facebook, Google, same situation, right? Which is where it gets frustrating, because GA4, you fair to assume, or at least from the Facebook marketer standpoint, it's going to bias towards Google versus Facebook. Last click, first click, all these different attribution models that are all in there. But I do want to ask you a little bit more on the UGC piece, because I think from an acquisition or from a performance marketing standpoint for acquisition, UGC is so important, right? And you have channels that you can do to, or agencies you can hire to get UGC, right? Which can be needed. But if a brand can really build their own UGC or have a system to get their own UGC, oftentimes nothing can beat that, right? Are you using a specific tech or tool, that one of the many that I get cold DM'd on Twitter about all the time? Or are you doing like specific email flows when it comes to trying to get UGC from customers?
Question. So this is where the omni-channel effect or strategy comes into play, where we like to team up with agencies like yourself that is more focused on the creatives, the
Mhm.
user generated content, to essentially make email and SMS a vehicle to collect that and then kind of distribute it off to our partner agencies. Now, we tend to do it via two areas. So, of course, an automated flow where we prompt people to submit, some of their video recordings, them using products, giveaways, and so forth. The software we use for that, and I might be calling it out incorrectly, but I think we've used Social Snowball in
Mm.
past on past accounts, which is great. And then, of course, we attach it to some incentive. We Dira Dry is one of the brands that we service. They've recently done a big push where become our next ad. So if you submit a video or a review, the winner will essentially become our next, paid ad creatives. And then you get people that spotlight or that stage where, wow, I'm actually going to be your next paid ad. So we kind of, we have the software in place. We've got the timing and the triggers and the whatnot and the incentives. But it all really comes down to, the appeal of the product. If the product isn't appealing, it falls flat. You know all about,
Yeah.
the right product fit for this. But we do absolutely, back. But I think we are only a vehicle to that. But I think there's other specialists that we try and complement a little bit better, on that front, rather than owning that piece, on a solo manner.
Yeah, that collaboration between agencies so important for clients. Even if the agencies don't know each other, if they do, it's great, right, with referrals. But even if they don't know each other, because just like you said, what you can do could help fuel creative for the acquisition team or for the paid ads team. We've worked with brands where we've tried various different actual like post-production edited creatives in Adobe, whatever it may be, right? And nothing could beat the unedited, organic, light in the background, super blown out, grainy photo, one sent from customers. Like nothing could beat those, right? Those have just continued to be the top performers. So it's always great when you can have two agencies or multiple agencies working together that way so that you can combine efforts. Well, that's six figures. I know your next thing we're looking at is seven figures. And that's where kind of in the blog article, you started to talk about things get a little bit more sophisticated, but still stay relatively simple, right? Things increase a little bit of complexity, but it's still not getting as complicated as things could be, or as we could make things be. What is retention marketing? What does email SMS generally look like as a baseline for seven-figure brands?
Moving on to the next batch. Yeah, look, here's the thing about email and SMS marketing as a channel. The foundational pieces like your core flows, campaign ideation, sending campaigns is applicable to any size business. Where it becomes a little different for the seven figures usually is like volume and cadence
Hmm.
is usually ramped up quite significantly. So that's what we definitely see is the cadence is different. They also tend to dabble more in the subscription side of things. We've tied our business model to a subscription model, and we want to ensure that we can, increase our repeat purchase revenue from subscribers. They tend to focus heavily on, yep, I can get the first purchase in, good stuff, acquisition is there. They also tend to spend a lot more money, on the top of the funnel, the acquisition channels. And they need to capture a bigger chunk of that market when it comes down to LTV, repeat purchase revenue. So there we focus a lot more on replenishment type of flows. How can we get people to rebuy the product? You talk about very intense post-purchase flows where if it's a product that someone needs to use over, let's say, a 30-day period, you want to educate them, nurture them, so they use that product so we can get them to rebuy in 30 days time. Otherwise, we all know the typical case of I've got 12 bottles of shaving foam
Too
left.
much.
Yeah, too much overstock. I don't need to buy more from you. So it's a much bigger problem for the seven figures and up, where they need to move stock fast. Their warehousing fulfillment costs are quite expensive just because there's more volumes. So in that regard, fulfillment, stock issues, overstock, becomes challenging. They usually have a lot more SKUs because they just sell more. The data collection is also a lot more difficult. So when you look at, retention cohorts for the seven-figure brands, it's also a lot more complicated just because there's more layers, to their business essentially. So your ability to extract insights from these retention cohorts and data, um, becomes a lot more complicated in that regard. And then also, as I've mentioned, there's a lot more agencies and hands and resources involved in these bigger businesses. So your omni-channel, like you say, working with different agencies, different resources, consultants, also becomes complicated because everything needs to plug into email and SMS as a channel, as a retention marketing vehicle. So yeah, you definitely ramp up the complexity around the channels. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I mean, great example with the too many or the product replenishment flow. I think that's when it gets exciting because oftentimes them having too many products is not the problem. It's something to do with them either adapting it into their life. Or I was at a D2C conference last year and someone from Hexclad was on stage talking, and they were sharing some pretty interesting things that they do with integrating post-purchase survey to understand a little bit more about the dietary parameters, I'll say, of someone. Are they vegan? Are they vegetarian? Do they eat meat? And then they use that to guide their follow-up flows when it comes to like giving them recipes or things like that. So that's just one example, but always interesting of how you can also incorporate like education, incorporate different types of emails to help continue those purchases and not just additional coupons or additional emails with a CTA for a purchase that way.
Yeah, yeah, on the money there. And, it all comes down to personalization, the
Mm.
typical right person at the right time, with the right message. People are trying to, of course, nail that down. Talking about Hexlad, I signed up to their newsletter recently, probably for the seventh time. And they had a very interesting approach. Well, this is if I looked into it correctly. So what they do is they don't give you a discount incentive on the first opt-in to the newsletter. What they do is they give you a discount incentive for the second purchase of an item, which is interesting because if I unlock the discount for the second purchase and I'm only on my first purchase, I haven't made the first purchase, when they strike me later and they remind me of, that initial discount that I unlocked to buy my second item, that might get me to make that second purchase because I feel like I've, unlocked something that is,
Mm-hmm.
rewarded to me. I found that a super unique approach to try and get, repeat buyers, because I did look at I don't know if we've probably read the same article where the problem they have is the decision making cycle, or the length is quite hectic for them, just because you don't decide tomorrow that you're going to buy an expensive set of pans and pots. You do a lot of research online, because it's pricey, it's not cheap. So they had to find, many ways to, exactly like you said, how can we collect more data points that aids, our ability to close, this, or shorten that sales cycle. So it was pretty interesting.
That is interesting. I'd be very curious to see how that's doing for them. It's almost like it would be sitting at the back of your mind
Yeah.
that you have that opportunity that way. And you also
Exactly.
said something else, looking for the right person at the right time. I don't know much at all about what I'm about to ask you, so just kind of curious your perspective on it. But I've seen and read that Klaviyo released predictive analytics, or a new feature in their platform that is supposed to be able to, within a good time window, predict when someone's next purchase is going to be. How's that been working? What is does it work as well as it sounds? And what's that been looking like?
Full question, yeah, it's a very good question, especially since the whole AI conversation and topic
Hmm.
is so hot. I'm on the fence about it, 50-50. We have, of course, enabled it for brands, and it's okay. There's other tools out there that's trying to achieve the same thing. Like Repeat is also a piece of software that also they require a large data set of past behaviors, like shopping behaviors, buying behaviors, so they can come up with, patterns within the data. It looks like if someone purchased shaving foam, for a 30-day period or 30 tablets, it looks like we need to kind of hit them with, replenishment flow after 30 days or 25 days or whatever the case may be. So the first challenge is that they need a large data set to really train their machine learning models, to be able to understand and trigger this correctly. Without that, you can't do much. So that's the first requirement is you need large volumes of that. The gripe I have with it is the machine will never take the overstock, like I'm not ready to make another purchase, into account, um, because it's only understanding like numbers, behaviors. It's not connected to, let's say, qualitative, results where I'm a customer support person. I was just on a call with this person, and he told me that he doesn't need 12 more shaving foam bottles. The machines won't understand that. They will just constantly, throw the message out, getting people to buy more, buy more, buy more. So I think they're trying to, of course, get these models to try and work around those challenges. But we're not there yet. There's no way. I've looked at replenishment flows that are attached to machine learning AI stuff, and they just basically over message people. The timing is off. The timing is so sporadically and weird. Some people get it after 20 days, some people after 22 days, some people after 28 days. Like, what is it based on exactly? Behavioral data, historical data? Yeah. Um, the problem is that if you can't trust the machine, can you trust the human to do it in a manual way? That's also impossible, because now you've got a fixed date set to, let's say, after 30 days of the purchase, we're going to send an email. And is 30 days the right, time delay? Maybe it should be 35, maybe it should be 45. So I don't trust the human, the machine, not necessarily. So it's a bit of a black box at the minute. It is.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, especially with the AI piece to it. I was listening to a podcast. I think it was a Lex Friedman podcast. He was interviewing whoever is in charge. I can't remember their name, but they're in charge of AI for Meta, for all of Meta. And he called out something interesting, that AI is not as smart as we think it is right now. And the way that it currently works, like your chat GPTs or something like that, its goal is to predict what the next letter, character, or word should be. It's not necessarily thinking of a response, it's thinking of percentages of what the next letter should be. So when you say it can't, like, reason for issues with too much stock or things like that, that may, kind of translate into what's going on there. One thing that I do like as softwares for retention have advanced and improved is the ability to be able to skip, order quicker, or pause subscriptions, to where it used to, a long time ago, it used to just be get your subscription or cancel it. But I do like how a lot of softwares have kind of advanced to where you can at least skip it, give you a 3 or 4 day notice that it's coming up. I feel like that definitely, it helps with my retention with brands that I do subscriptions for, but I'm sure it helps with on the back end on the data as well. I'm not sure if you've seen that or not.
You are right. Look, of course, it's D2C brands. They don't want to have too many people skip or pause their subscription, because then you lose that cash flow ability. But I think for the end consumer, it is the right treatment. I mean, you do want to give them a good experience in the brand. And exactly like you stated, if skipping, pausing, switching out products is, better experience for the end customer, and it means that they're gonna, be retained over time, then you do want to enable that. And you're right, the skios, the loops, recharges of the world, they all have that baked into their platforms to give the end customer, those quick actions to either skip, pause, or switch out products. So it's a good point you're making.
And it just kind of shift gears before we go into our last round of questions, which is like our rapid fire questions. One thing I always like to ask agency owners is their perspective on red flags when hiring an agency. And this is why I like to ask that. Understanding the business owner, the CMO, whoever it may be, may not have technical expertise at retention, email, SMS marketing, right? It can be more difficult to hire an email SMS agency. On top of that, hopefully they're not doing it that often, right? So it's not something that they have a lot of repetition on. So it's a newer thing to them. The agency world is a whole different conversation. A lot of times agencies are sales engines that also have a service, but the sales side gets more focus on it. So I like to ask reputable agencies, what are some common red flags or concerns that you've heard when it comes to sales or just overall process for email or retention agencies?
Yeah, very good question. Putting me on the spot there. Okay, so a couple of red flags, things that, like, even me, as if I was the brand that wants to invest in an agency. I think the first one is definitely the typical, portfolios where numbers are being revealed, but there's no context added to it. Your typical 30 to 40% increase in revenue year over year, right? The context around it is absolutely lacking. Now, of course, agencies, I mean, it's sometimes very tricky to get a case study out there just because you can't reveal sensitive data, especially when there's bigger brands and so on. But that's the first thing, is always ask for context around these numbers. How was it influenced? Was it influenced by, large paid ad spend, for instance? So that's the first thing, really, is ask the questions around those numbers, scrutinize the case studies. And if they kind of, triple around it, and it seems like they don't want to really expose those things, of course, it's a bit of a red flag. That's the first one. Second one is definitely, if you want to speak to some of their team members, people that will be working on your account, you do request to, get some of those team members on a call, because we know in the agency world, a lot of the services are being, outsourced to whichever parts of the world. That, I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. We also do it to keep our margins high, because we can't just employ people in the States. I mean, that will really kill our margins. But if a client asks us, can I meet the team that will be working on my account? We can easily get 4 or 5 people on that call, and they can meet them face to face, no problem at all. So that's very, very important. Is there transparency there? Can they expose it? Or is it a one-man band guy that just outsources to whoever's available? And then also is other red flags definitely is if they request to speak to previous clients of yours. If you kind of triple around that, that's also problematic. We've had requests where people wanted to, prospects wanted to speak to some of our previous customers. Of course, we'll recommend our best, most happiest, customers ever. Of course, I mean, that's a tactic, but we don't hide that. I mean, they can get in touch with them if they want to. We even sometimes we expose some of the relationships that went a little bit sour for X, Y, and Z reason, or they ran out of budget and they churned. But we don't hide that, because there's a lot of reasons why that happens. So I think transparency is the key. Yeah, I know it's very difficult to to tap into the transparency of a particular brand, but we yeah, at Magnet Monster, for example, we try to be as transparent as possible. So when someone signs up with us, there's no hidden agendas, there's no falsified things, and so on. And that's kind of some of the red flags that I believe is that needs to be kind of scrutinized.
Yeah, I can definitely understand all of those, but especially wanting to meet the team you're going to work with. So it doesn't fall into a situation where you have a great sales experience and then you get handed off to a team that is completely different from the sales experience, right? I think another common one is not just guarantees, but guarantees that are not based off of an audit or actual business numbers. Like if they have not dug into your website, your Google Analytics, your ad account, or platform data, and also understand your P&L, it's very hard to believe that there could be a guarantee involved, right? On top of that, at least from the acquisition side, the algorithm changes all the time. Zuckerberg's up and down and left and right, so things can change. But well, those are good. As we wrap up here, I just have kind of three quick rapid fire questions for you. First one: if you had to summarize everything today that we have discussed into a marketing mindset, what mindset should marketers or business owners have when it comes to retention marketing?
I think a curious mind is critical. Always stay curious, stay interested. And then I also think creativity, think out of the box, and energy. If you pair those three things, there's a lot of great things that can happen in your retention marketing channels. So curiosity, um, creativity, and energy.
Well, and that segues great into the second one. I'll pull on that curiosity piece. For anyone listening who is at the stage of figuring out what they'd like to do in the marketing industry, what marketing role or roles do you think will have the highest demand opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think still data-driven people is far and few in between. Everybody says they are data-driven. I've met 5% of people that are truly data-driven, that really understand numbers, how to piece different patterns and trends together to really come up with proper insights. So don't just become another Klaviyo expert or another, PPC expert. Really, like you say, dig into P&Ls, learn more about unit economics, learn more about fulfillment processes, those type of things, and then really become a solid person that understands more about the numbers and the business operations and not just your isolated little channel. They are very hard to find.
Yeah, it's hard to replace people that can see the big picture.
Yeah,
Very important to have technical expertise, very important to be able to execute, right? But being able to see that big picture and put pieces together and plan and move pieces around, very important as well. And
nailed.
last question for you: tell us, where can listeners connect with you and learn more about you and your agency?
Absolutely. So our website, magnetmonster.co.uk, is where you'll find our services, our blogs, our courses. You can get a free Klaviyo audit if you want to request one of those. And then, of course, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I am mostly active on LinkedIn. And then, yeah, just shoot me a DM there or follow me. And yeah, I'll be waiting for you in the comment sections.
Cool. Well, this was a great episode. I appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. What a great chat.